Newlyweds Angelina and Cole planned a romantic camping trip in New Mexico's Gila wilderness to celebrate their love. But a chilling, unnatural sound, like metal scraping bone, shattered the night. Cole woke to find Angelina gone, her tent empty, her gear vanished. A dream escape turned into his worst nightmare. The police uncovered 4 mysterious clues, but will they be enough to unravel the truth? The Gila wilderness stretched endlessly under a bruised October sky. Its pinyon pines and jagged cliffs bathed in the fading glow of a New Mexico sunset. The air carried the sharp scent of resin and dust, a reminder of the land's untamed heart. Somewhere deep in this labyrinth of canyons and mesas, a piercing scream shattered the silence of the night. By morning, it was as if the forest itself had swallowed the sound, and with it, a young woman named Angelina. Angelina and Cole, newlyweds of just 1 month, had come to the Gila for a camping trip, chasing the last warmth of autumn before winter locked the wilderness in frost. She was 28, a nurse with a quick laugh and a love for the outdoors. Her dark hair always pulled into a practical braid. Cole, 30, a high school biology teacher, was quieter, methodical, the kind of man who double-checked knots and packed extra batteries. They'd met hiking in the Sandia Mountains 2 years earlier, bonding over topographic maps and campfire coffee. The Gila, with its 558,000 acres of untouched forest, was their chance to celebrate their new life together, to escape the noise of Albuquerque and feel the pulse of the wild. Their campsite, tucked in a clearing near the middle fork of the Gila River, was modest. A 2-person tent, a small fire pit, and a tarp strung between trees to shield their gear. Angelina had spent the evening snapping photos of the sunset, her camera clicking as Cole cooked trout over the fire. They'd laughed about the coyotes howling in the distance, their calls eerie but familiar. City folks would think that's a monster, Angelina teased, nudging Cole. He grinned, tossing a stick into the flames. By 10 p.m., they'd crawled into their tent, the forest settling into a heavy quiet. At 2:37 a.m., Cole jolted awake. A sound had ripped through the night. Not a coyote's howl, but something guttural, almost mechanical, like metal grinding against bone. His heart pounded as he reached for Angelina, expecting her warmth beside him. The sleeping bag was empty. Her boots, her jacket, her camera gone. The tent's zipper was half open, swaying in the chilly breeze. Cole stumbled outside, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, calling her name. The forest answered with silence. Angelina was gone. By dawn, Cole was frantic. He'd spent hours searching the clearing, shouting until his voice cracked. The river gurgled nearby, its current steady but too shallow to sweep anyone away. He checked the trail they'd hiked in on, a faint path winding through juniper and oak, but found no footprints, no broken branches. His phone had no signal. Cell towers were a fantasy this deep in the Gila. At 6 a.m., he packed the essentials and hiked 7 miles to the nearest ranger station, his breath visible in the cold morning air. Ranger Maria Delgado took his report, her face grim. Cole's hand shook as he described the night. The strange sound, the empty tent, Angelina's missing gear. She's not the type to wander off, he insisted. She knows the backcountry. We've done the Appalachian Trail, the Sierras. Something's wrong. Maria nodded, already radioing for backup. The Gila was vast, unforgiving. People vanished here. Hikers, hunters, loners chasing solitude. Most were found within days, dehydrated or disoriented. But something in Cole's eyes, a raw edge of panic, told her this wasn't a typical case. By noon, a search and rescue operation was underway. Volunteers from Silver City joined rangers and sheriff's deputies, their ATVs rumbling along dirt roads. A helicopter thumped overhead, its blades slicing through the thin mountain air. Bloodhounds sniffed Angelina's scarf, pulled from her pack, but the dog circled the campsite aimlessly, as if her scent had dissolved. The team combed a 5-mile radius, checking ravines and riverbanks. The Gila's terrain was brutal: rocky outcrops, sudden drops, and thickets of catclaw acacia that tore its skin. Every rustle in the brush felt like a clue, every shadow a threat. Detective Javier Ruiz, a 15-year veteran with the Grant County Sheriff's Office, arrived that afternoon. At 42, Javier was lean and weathered, his dark eyes sharp but haunted. He'd grown up in Silver City, fishing the Gila River as a kid, but he knew its darker side. 10 years earlier, his younger sister had died in a climbing accident in these same mountains. The guilt of not being there still gnawed at him, driving his obsession with missing persons cases. He listened to Cole's story, noting the man's cracked lips and trembling hands. "Tell me about the sound," Javier said, his voice low. "It wasn't natural," Cole replied, staring at the ground. "Like something big dragging metal. I thought it was a bear at first, but it wasn't. I've heard bears." Javier scribbled in his notebook, his mind already turning. Bears didn't drag metal. Coyotes didn't either. The Gila had its legends, whispers of a creature locals called the Chupacabra, a name tossed around half in jest. Javier didn't buy into folklore, but he'd seen enough strange tracks and mutilated livestock to know the wilderness held secrets. The first day yielded nothing. No footprints, no scraps of clothing, no sign Angelina had wandered off. The team found her camera tripod near the river, its legs sunk into the mud, but the camera itself was missing. Cole swore it had been in the tent. "She wouldn't leave it out," he said, his voice breaking. "She was obsessive about her gear." Javier crouched by the tripod, studying the ground. The dirt was disturbed, but not by clear footprints, more like something heavy had been dragged, leaving shallow grooves toward the trees. By day 2, the search expanded. Volunteers scoured cliff edges and dry creek beds, their faces tight with exhaustion. Maria coordinated grid searches, her radio crackling with updates. Cole stayed close, refusing to rest, his eyes bloodshot. He kept repeating, "She's out there. She has to be." Javier watched him closely. Grief looked different on everyone, but something about Cole's intensity, his insistence on certain details like the sound, felt off. Not suspicious, not yet, but enough to make Javier's instincts hum. That evening, a volunteer stumbled on a clue: a torn piece of Angelina's jacket, caught on a thorn bush a mile from the campsite. The fabric was navy, matching Cole's description, but it was stained with a dark, tacky substance. Blood? Mud? Javier bagged it, his pulse quickening. The location didn't make sense. Too far from the tent, too deep in a thicket for a casual hike. And the drag marks from the tripod led in the opposite direction. He sent the fabric for analysis, but results would take days. The Gila didn't wait for lab reports. As night fell, the search camp buzzed with uneasy chatter. A local volunteer, an older man named Tomas, pulled Javier aside. "You hear about the Chupacabra?" he asked, his voice low. Javier frowned. "Don't start with that." But Tomas pressed on. "Folks have seen things out here. Tracks that don't match coyote or mountain lion. Dead goats with their throats torn out, no blood left." "That sound Cole heard?" "I've heard it 2 years ago." Javier waved him off, but the story stuck. He'd seen livestock kills himself, clean, precise, like something surgical. Not a bear, not a wolf. He pushed the thought aside. This was a missing person case, not a ghost hunt. Back at the campsite, Javier sat with Cole, trying to piece it together. "Walk me through it again," he said. Cole's story didn't waver. The sound, the empty tent, the missing gear. But he added something new. "There was a smell," he said, almost reluctant. "Like sulfur. Rotten eggs. I didn't notice it at first, but it was there." Javier's pen paused. Sulfur wasn't a bear. It wasn't a coyote. It could be geological. Hot springs weren't uncommon in the Gila, but none were mapped near the campsite. As the second night closed in, Cole sat by the fire, clutching Angelina's scarf. His face was hollow, his eyes fixed on the flames. "We were supposed to start a family," he whispered, unprompted. "She wanted to teach our kids how to climb, like she did." Javier felt a pang. His sister had been the same, always planning her next adventure. He wanted to promise Cole they'd find her, but he'd learned long ago not to make promises he couldn't keep. The team gathered for a briefing, their faces lit by headlamps. Maria reported no new leads, but the mood was grim. The Gila was vast, and 2 days without a trace meant the odds were slipping. Javier studied the map, his finger tracing the river's curve. Something wasn't adding up. The tripod, the jacket, the drag marks, they pointed in different directions like pieces of a puzzle scattered by the wind. On the morning of day 3, a shout echoed from a ravine a half-mile west. A volunteer, a young woman with dirt-streaked cheeks, held up a small object. Angelina's camera, its lens cracked, half buried under a pile of leaves. Javier's stomach twisted as he turned it over. The memory card was missing. Cole, standing nearby, went pale. "She never took that card out," he said, his voice barely audible. "Never." Javier crouched, scanning the ground. Beside the camera, faint in the dirt, was a single track. Not a boot, not a paw, but something clawed, elongated, unlike anything he'd seen. It vanished into the underbrush, leading deeper into the forest. The air felt heavier now, the Gila's silence pressing in. What had Angelina seen that night? And what, or who, had taken her camera's memory? The Gila wilderness woke under a shroud of mist, its canyons swallowing the dawn. The air was sharp with the bite of pine and damp earth, but beneath it lingered something acrid, like a faint whiff of sulfur that clung to the back of Detective Javier Ruiz's throat. 4 days had passed since Angelina vanished from her tent, leaving her husband Cole alone in the dark after that unearthly sound, a grinding, guttural noise he couldn't explain. The discovery of her cracked camera, its memory card missing, had turned the search into something more sinister. The single clawed track beside it, neither animal nor human, gnawed at Javier's mind as he stood at the edge of the ravine where it was found. The search operation had swelled to over 50 people, rangers, sheriff's deputies, and volunteers from Silver City and beyond. ATVs growled along narrow trails, their tires kicking up clouds of red dust. Helicopters swept low, their rotors thumping like a heartbeat over the forest. Bloodhounds strained against their leashes, noses to the ground, but they kept circling back, confused, as if Angelina's scent had been erased. The Gila was a beast of a landscape. 558,000 acres of cliffs, rivers, and thickets that could hide a person, or a body, forever. Every snapped twig, every shadow in the underbrush felt like a taunt. Javier, crouched by the ravine, studying the spot where the camera was found. The clawed track was still there, faint but unmistakable, leading into a tangle of juniper and mesquite. He'd photographed it, sent it to a wildlife expert, but his gut told him it wasn't a bear or a mountain lion. The Gila had its stories, whispers of the Chupacabra, a creature blamed for bloodless livestock kills. Javier didn't believe in monsters, but he couldn't shake Tomas's word from the night before. Tracks that don't match anything. Dead goats, no blood. He pushed the thought down. This was a missing person case, and Angelina was out there, alive, he hoped. Cole hovered nearby, his face gaunt, his hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. He hadn't slept more than a few hours since the search began, and his eyes darted to every sound in the forest. "She wouldn't just leave," he said again, his voice raw. "She knew this place. We planned every step." Javier nodded, but his attention was on Cole's boots, caked with mud, but no scratches, no signs of struggle. If Angelina had been taken, why was Cole untouched? The question lingered unspoken. Ranger Maria Delgado coordinated the search from a makeshift command post near the campsite, a folding table covered with maps and radios. The team had expanded their grid to 10 miles, focusing on the middle fork of the Gila River and its tributaries. The terrain was treacherous, loose shale that crumbled underfoot, sudden drops hidden by brush, and slot canyons that could trap a hiker in a flash flood. Maria's voice crackled over the radio, calm but strained. Took the high ground near Black Canyon. We're losing daylight. Tensions were fraying. A volunteer, a burly man named Greg, argued with Maria about the search's pace. We're wasting time on the river, he snapped. She's a hiker. She'd head uphill, not down. Maria held her ground, pointing to the map. Her jacket was found downstream. We follow the evidence. Greg stormed off, muttering about bureaucracy. Javier watched the exchange, noting the undercurrent of frustration. Searches like this broke people, volunteers, families, even rangers. Everyone wanted answers, but the Gila wasn't giving them up. Cole, meanwhile, clashed with the team. He insisted Angelina wouldn't have wandered far, that the official theory, she'd gotten lost or fallen, was nonsense. She's done tougher hikes than this, he told Javier, his voice rising. She carried a GPS, a knife, everything. She wouldn't just disappear. Javier studied him, searching for cracks in his story. Cole's grief seemed real, but his insistence on details, the sound, the sulfur smell, the missing camera card, felt rehearsed, like he was trying to steer the narrative. That afternoon, Javier interviewed Cole again, this time at the command post. "Tell me about your marriage," he said, keeping his tone neutral. Cole stiffened. "What's that got to do with anything?" Javier leaned forward. "Everything matters. Were you fighting? Any reason she might have left the tent?" Cole's jaw tightened. "We were happy. Just married, for God's sake. This was our celebration." He paused, then added, "She was stressed about work sometimes, but that's it." Javier made a note. Work stress. It was a thread, thin but worth pulling. On day 5, a breakthrough came, not from the search team, but from a local hunter named Elena, who'd been tracking game near Sapillo Creek, 3 miles from the campsite. She flagged down a ranger, holding up a small object, a keychain with a tiny silver bear, engraved with the letter A. Cole confirmed it was Angelina's, a gift from her brother. The keychain was found in a clearing, half buried under pine needles, near a cluster of strange marks in the dirt, more clawed tracks like the one by the camera, but deeper, as if something heavy had pressed into the ground. Beside them was a faint smear of blood, already drying in the sun. Javier's pulse quickened as he examined the scene. The blood was fresh, no more than a day old, but too little for a major injury. The tracks led toward a rocky outcrop, then vanished, as if whatever made them had leapt or been lifted. Elena, a weathered woman with sharp eyes, pointed to the ground. "I've hunted here 20 years, she said. "That's no coyote. Too big, too wrong." Javier didn't respond, but her words echoed Tomas's Chupacabra talk. He bagged the keychain and sent the blood for analysis, though he knew results would take time. The find shifted the search's focus to Sapillo Creek, but it raised more questions. The keychain was 3 miles from the campsite, too far for Angelina to wander in the dark without her GPS or flashlight, both still in the tent. And the blood, whose was it? Javier's mind churned. If Angelina was injured, why no trail? If she was taken, why no signs of struggle at the campsite? And those tracks, what animal left marks like that? Only to disappear? That evening, Cole sat alone by the river, clutching the bare keychain. Javier watched from a distance, noting the way Cole's shoulders shook. "She always kept this on her," Cole said when Javier approached, his voice barely a whisper. "Her brother gave it to her after their mom died. Said it'd keep her safe." He laughed, bitter. "Some luck." Javier sat beside him, the river's murmur filling the silence. "We're doing everything we can," he said, but the words felt hollow. He'd said them to families before, including his own, after his sister's death. They never helped. Cole looked up, his eyes wet. "You think I had something to do with this, don't you?" Javier didn't flinch. "I think everyone's a suspect until I know what happened." Cole shook his head. "I die for her. You don't get it. Javier wanted to believe him, but doubt was his job. Cole's story held, but the missing camera card, the sulfur smell, the untouched tent, it all felt too clean, too staged. As night fell, the search camp grew quiet, save for the crackle of radios and the distant howl of coyotes. Around a fire, volunteers swapped stories, their voices low. Elena, the hunter, mentioned the Chupacabra again, describing a kill she'd found last year. A deer, its throat slashed, its body drained. No predator does that, she said. Not here. Another volunteer scoffed, but others leaned in, uneasy. Javier listened from the edge of the group, his skepticism warring with the evidence. The tracks, the blood, the sound Cole described. It didn't add up to any animal he knew. But he wasn't ready to chase myths. Not yet. Maria approached, her face drawn. We're stretching thin, she said. If we don't find something tomorrow, we'll have to scale back. Javier nodded, but the thought of giving up twisted his gut. He'd failed his sister. He wouldn't fail Angelina. He spread the map on the table, tracing the new search area. Sapillo Creek was rugged, full of caves and overhangs. If Angelina, or her body, was there, they'd find her. Or so he told himself. On the morning of day 6, a shout broke the camp's rhythm. A volunteer, a college student named Sam, had been scouting near Sapillo Creek when he found something tucked in a crevice. A crumpled note, written on a torn piece of paper from a topo map. The handwriting was shaky, unmistakably Angelina's, confirmed by Cole. It read, not what it seems. Don't trust. The rest was smeared, illegible, as if written in haste. The paper smelled faintly of sulfur, like the air around the campsite that first night. Javier held the note, his mind racing. Don't trust who? Cole. A stranger? The note was found 3 miles from the camera, 2 from the keychain, forming a rough triangle around the campsite. Was Angelina leaving a trail, or had someone else placed these clues? And why the sulfur smell? Again? As the team gathered, Cole stared at the note, his face ashen. She was trying to tell us something, he whispered. But Javier's eyes were on the horizon, where the Gila's cliffs loomed like silent witnesses. What had Angelina seen? And who, or what, didn't she trust? The Gila wilderness brooded under a leaden sky, its canyons and mesas cloaked in a chill that seeped into the bones. 6 days had passed since Angelina vanished from her tent, leaving behind a fractured camera, a blood-smeared keychain, and now a cryptic note scrawled on a torn topographic map. Not what it seems. Don't trust. The words in Angelina's shaky handwriting hung over the search camp like a storm cloud. Detective Javier Ruiz stood by the command post, the note sealed in an evidence bag, its smeared ink taunting him. The sulfur smell clinging to it was faint but unmistakable, a thread tying it to the campsite and Cole's story of that strange, grinding sound in the night. The Gila was hiding something, and Javier was starting to doubt the search was looking in the right places. The operation had grown chaotic. 50 volunteers, rangers, and deputies combed the middle fork of the Gila River and Sapillo Creek, but the terrain fought back. Loose shale slid under boots, and narrow slot canyons swallowed sound. Helicopters buzzed overhead, their sweeps yielding nothing but endless vistas of pinyon and juniper. The bloodhounds, once eager, now whined in confusion, their noses useless against the Gila's vastness. Ranger Maria Delgado's voice was hoarse from shouting orders, her maps marked with red X's where clues, the camera, the keychain, the note, had been found. They formed a rough triangle, but no pattern emerged. Javier traced the lines on the map, his jaw tight. Something was wrong. They were chasing ghosts. The official theory, Angelina had wandered off, injured or disoriented, was fraying. She was an experienced hiker, meticulous, with a GPS and survival skills. The note suggested intent, maybe fear. Don't trust who? Javier's mind churned. Cole, her husband, was the obvious suspect, but his grief seemed raw, his story consistent. Still, Javier couldn't shake the feeling that Cole knew more than he let on. The sulfur smell, the missing camera card, the clawed tracks, none of it fit a simple accident. And the Chupacabra whispers, fueled by locals like Elena and Tomas, lingered like the mist over the cliffs. Javier dismissed the creature talk, but those tracks gnawed at him. They weren't coyote, weren't bear. What then? The search had been too narrow, Javier realized. The team had focused on the river and nearby trails, assuming Angelina stayed close to the campsite. But the keychain was found 3 miles away, the note farther still. They'd missed something, maybe a trail, a witness, or a sign she'd been lured away. At the morning briefing, Maria admitted the strain. "We've covered 10 miles, but the Gila's too big," she said, her eyes tired. "We're burning out." Volunteers grumbled, some questioning why they hadn't searched the higher ridges or the caves along Sapillo Creek. Javier felt the same frustration. The note's discovery should have shifted their focus, but the team was stuck, rechecking the same ground. Cole was unraveling. He'd been cooperative, trailing the search teams, but now he snapped at anyone who suggested Angelina might be lost. "She didn't wander off," he shouted at Greg, the volunteer who'd argued with Maria. "She knew this place. Someone took her." His outburst drew stares. Maria pulled him aside, her voice low but firm. "We're doing everything we can, Cole. You need to let us work." Cole stormed off, kicking dirt, and Javier watched his notebook open. Cole's anger felt real, but it could mask guilt. Javier had seen it before. Grief and deception wore the same face. The team's missteps piled up. They'd overlooked the caves near Sapillo Creek, assuming Angelina wouldn't venture into such rugged terrain at night. The clawed tracks had been dismissed as animal, not followed. And no one had questioned why the note smelled of sulfur like the campsite. Javier's sister's death haunted him here. Her climbing accident had been ruled a fall, but he'd always wondered if the investigation missed something. He wouldn't let that happen again. He grabbed Maria. "We need to check those caves." The note was near one. "It's a lead." Maria hesitated. "That's rough country. No trails, no access. If she went there, she wasn't alone." Javier's eyes narrowed. Exactly. He didn't say it aloud, but the note's words, not what it seems, suggested Angelina knew something. Had she seen someone? Heard something? The Chupacabra talk crept back, unbidden. Elena's story of bloodless deer. Tomas's warning about strange tracks. Javier shook it off. He needed facts, not folklore. That afternoon, Javier interviewed Elena again, the hunter who'd found the keychain. She sat on a log, cleaning her rifle, her eyes scanning the horizon. "You don't think it's an accident, do you?" she asked. Javier didn't answer, but his silence was enough. Elena lowered her voice. "I've seen things out here. Tracks like the ones by the camera and the keychain. They show up near kills, goats, deer, even cattle. No blood, just punctures." She tapped her neck. "Locals call it Chupacabra, but I don't know what it is. Something's not right." Javier pressed her for details. Where, when, how often? She pointed to a ridge above Sapillo Creek. "Up there last spring. Same tracks, same smell, sulfur." The sulfur detail hit hard. Cole had mentioned it, and now the note carried it too. Javier's mind raced. Hot springs could explain the smell. Geothermal activity wasn't rare in the Gila, but none were mapped near the creek. Could it be chemical? Industrial? He made a note to check for abandoned mines or dump sites, though the Gila was too remote for that to make sense. Elena's story pointed to another possibility. Someone using the Chupacabra legend to cover their tracks. A poacher, a smuggler, someone who didn't want to be found. Angelina might have stumbled onto something, or someone. Javier shared the theory with Maria, who frowned but didn't dismiss it. If she ran into trouble, poachers say, why no signs at the campsite? No struggle. Javier didn't have an answer, but the notes suggested Angelina had time to write, to hide something. Maybe she'd seen something she wasn't supposed to. He proposed redirecting the search to the caves and ridges above Sapillo Creek, focusing on the tracks and any human activity. Maria agreed, though she warned it would stretch their resources thin. If we're wrong, we lose time, she said. Javier nodded. If we're right, we find her. That evening, Javier sat with Cole by the campfire, the air heavy with the scent of burning pinyon. Cole clutched Angelina's scarf, his knuckles white. You're looking at me like I did something, he said, his voice low. Javier met his gaze. I'm looking at everything. That's my job. Cole's eyes welled up. We were planning a life. She wanted to move out here, get a cabin. She loved this place. His voice broke. I should have heard her leave. I should have stopped her. Javier felt a pang. Guilt was a familiar ghost. His sister's face flashed in his mind, her laugh cut short by a fall he couldn't prevent. He pushed it down. We'll find her, he said, but the words tasted like ash. Cole's story held, but cracks were showing. He'd mentioned Angelina's work stress, but dodged details. Javier had checked. She was a nurse at a clinic in Albuquerque, respected, no red flags. But Cole's insistence on her skills, her caution, didn't match the scattered clues. If she was so prepared, why leave her GPS? Why no trail? Javier's doubt grew, not just about Cole, but about the search itself. They'd missed the caves, ignored the tracks too long. What else had they overlooked? The next morning, Javier hiked to Sapillo Creek with a small team, including Elena, who knew the area. The caves were dark slits in the cliffs, some barely wide enough for a person. The ground was rocky, hiding tracks, but Elena pointed out a faint scuff mark near one entrance. Human, not animal, like a boot heel dragged in haste. Javier's pulse quickened. They focused on the river too long, assuming Angelina stayed low. If she climbed here, alone or coerced, they'd wasted days. He cursed under his breath. His sister's case had been botched by assumptions. He wouldn't let this one slip. Inside the cave, the air was damp, heavy with that same sulfur tang. Flashlights swept over jagged walls, revealing nothing. No footprints, no blood. But at the back, half hidden by a boulder, was a small pile of ash, fresh, as if someone had burned something recently. Javier crouched, sifting through it. Paper? Cloth? He couldn't tell, but the sulfur smell was stronger here. He bagged the ash, his mind racing. A fire in a cave wasn't random. Someone had been here. Maybe Angelina, maybe someone else. As the team exited the cave, Elena called out from a nearby ridge. She'd found something in the dirt. A metal tag, like those used on livestock, half buried under a rock. It was rusted, stamped with a number, 47, and coated in a thin layer of dried blood. Javier turned it over, his heart pounding. The tag didn't belong to any local ranch. He'd checked, and the blood matched the smear on the keychain. But what stopped him cold was the faint outline in the dirt nearby. Another clawed track, larger than the others, leading into a narrow canyon. It wasn't alone. Beside it was a single human footprint, small, like Angelina's. Javier stared at the tracks, the tag heavy in his hand. The note's words echoed, not what it seems. Had Angelina stumbled onto something? A poacher's trap? A hidden operation? Or was someone using the Chupacabra myth to scare people away? The human print suggested she wasn't alone, but whose was it? And why the livestock tag, miles from any ranch? As the team regrouped, the Gila's silence pressed in, heavier than ever. What had Angelina walked into? And who was walking with her? The Gila wilderness loomed under a sky heavy with the threat of rain, its cliffs and canyons carved in stark relief against the gathering clouds. 8 days had passed since Angelina vanished from her tent, leaving behind a trail of cryptic clues, a cracked camera with its memory card missing, a blood-smeared keychain, a note warning, not what it seems. Don't trust, and now a rusted livestock tag marked with a number 47, found beside a clawed track and a single human footprint. Detective Javier Ruiz held the tag, its weight slight, but its implications heavy. The Gila's silence felt like a challenge, daring him to uncover what it hid. The sulfur smell lingered in the air, faint but persistent, tying each clue together like a thread through a maze. The search had shifted to the rugged ridges above Sapillo Creek, where the latest find, a metal tag and mixed tracks, suggested Angelina had ventured far from the campsite, possibly not alone. The human footprint, small and delicate, matched the size of her hiking boots, but the clawed track beside it defied explanation. Not bear, not mountain lion, not coyote. Javier's wildlife expert had called it anomalous, a word that did little to ease his unease. Locals like Elena, the hunter, whispered of the Chupacabra, their stories of bloodless kills and strange tracks fueling camp rumors. Javier dismissed the myth, but the evidence was piling up. Something, or someone, was out here, and Angelina had crossed its path. The search team, now down to 40 volunteers due to exhaustion and dwindling hope, pressed deeper into the wilderness. The terrain was unforgiving, jagged rocks, hidden crevices, and thickets of catclaw acacia that snagged at clothing. Helicopters couldn't navigate the narrow canyons, and the bloodhounds remained useless, their noses baffled by the lack of scent. Ranger Maria Delgado's face was etched with fatigue as she updated the map, marking the livestock tag's location near a cluster of caves. "We're running out of time," she told Javier, her voice low. "The weather's turning. If she's out there, we need to find her now." The breakthrough came on day 9, not from the search team, but from an unlikely source. A teenage hiker named Riley, part of a youth group exploring the Gila's trails. She'd wandered off the main path near a dry creek bed, 2 miles from the livestock tag site, when she spotted something glinting in the dirt. It was a small, battered journal, its leather cover worn and stained with what looked like dry blood. Riley, shaken but sharp, flagged down a ranger and handed it over, pointing to where she'd found it, tucked beneath a flat rock, as if hidden in haste. Javier's hands trembled slightly as he opened the journal. It was Angelina's. Her initials, AM, were etched on the inside cover, and Cole confirmed it was the one she carried on hikes to log trails and wildlife sightings. The pages were filled with her neat handwriting, notes on birds, sketches of plants, coordinates of scenic spots. But the final entry, dated the night she vanished, was different. The ink was smudged, the words frantic. Heard it again. Not an animal. Sulfur smell stronger. Saw lights near the ridge. Someone's out there. Don't trust. The sentence cut off, mirroring the note found earlier. A smear of blood crossed the page, and a single word was scrawled in the margin. Chupa. Javier's heart pounded. Chupa. Short for Chupacabra? Or something else? The journal was a game-changer, proof Angelina had seen or heard something that night, something she feared. The mention of lights suggested human activity, poachers, smugglers, or worse. The sulfur smell and clawed tracks could be a cover, a way to scare off intruders. Javier bagged the journal, his mind racing. The blood on it matched the stains on the keychain and livestock tag, but lab results were still days away. He needed to know whose blood it was and what Angelina had seen on that ridge. The journal redirected the search to the ridge above Sapillo Creek, a jagged spine of rock dotted with caves and overhangs. Javier led a small team, Maria, Elena, and a forensics tech named Sarah, to the area. The climb was brutal, the shale slipping underfoot, the air thick with the threat of rain. Elena pointed out more clawed tracks, fainter now, leading toward a narrow cave mouth. "This is where I saw those kills last year," she said, her voice steady but eyes wary. "Deer, goats, drain dry. Same tracks." Javier nodded, his flashlight sweeping the ground. The tracks were fresh, pressed into the dirt beside a faint boot print. Angelina's size again. Inside the cave, the sulfur smell was overwhelming, stinging their eyes. Sarah, the forensics tech, scanned the walls with a UV light, revealing faint traces of blood spatter, too old to be Angelina's but enough to unsettle the team. At the back, they found a pile of charred debris, more ash, like in the previous cave, but mixed with fragments of bone. Not human, Sarah confirmed, likely animal, but the precision of the burns suggested a blowtorch or chemical fire. Javier's stomach twisted. This wasn't a hiker's campfire. Someone had been here, destroying evidence. Sarah collected samples, her hands steady despite the cave's oppressive air. The blood spatter's at least a month old, she said. Could be from those kills Elena mentioned. Javier's mind churned. Poachers? A cult? Or something more mundane, like illegal dumping masked by the Chupacabra myth? The journal's mention of lights pointed to human activity, but the tracks and sulfur smell didn't add up. He needed more coordinates, a witness, anything to tie it together. Back at the search camp, Javier showed the journal to Cole, whose face crumpled at the sight of Angelina's handwriting. He traced the initials with a trembling finger, his voice breaking. She always carried this. Said it was her way of remembering the wild. He read the final entry, his eyes widening at Chupa. What does that mean? He asked, almost himself. She didn't believe in that stuff. She laughed at those stories. Javier watched him closely. Cole's shock seemed genuine, but his avoidance of the don't trust line felt deliberate. Was he hiding something, or just broken by grief? Maria pulled Javier aside, her expression grim. Cole's not telling us everything. He's too focused on that sound, the smell. It's like he's steering us. Javier nodded, his doubts about Cole growing. The journal suggested Angelina suspected someone. Cole? A stranger? Her work stress, which Cole had mentioned vaguely, was another loose thread. Javier called her clinic in Albuquerque, learning she'd taken a last-minute leave the week before the trip. Personal reasons, her supervisor said, but offered no details. Had she been running from something, or toward it? The emotional toll was spreading. Volunteers whispered about giving up, their faces drawn from days of fruitless searching. Maria confided in Javier, her voice low. I've seen searches like this. After 10 days, it's usually a recovery, not a rescue. Javier's jaw tightened. He'd failed his sister. He wouldn't fail Angelina. But the journal's words haunted him. Not what it seems. What had she uncovered, and why had it cost her? The journal's discovery was ripe for video. A close-up of Riley's trembling hands as she hands over the blood-stained book, the camera panning to Angelina's frantic handwriting under flickering flashlight beams. The cave scene could amplify tension, sweeping shots of the dark, sulfur-heavy air, the charred bone fragments glinting in the UV light. A slow zoom on the word Chupa in the margin, paired with a low, pulsing soundtrack, would leave viewers on edge. The final shot, Javier holding the journal, the wind howling outside the cave as a voiceover asks, what did Angelina see that night? On day 10, as the team prepared to scour the ridge, Sarah rushed to Javier with a preliminary lab report. The blood on the journal and keychain was human, not Angelina's, but an unknown male's. The livestock tag's blood matched it. Javier's pulse raced. A second person was involved, someone injured, possibly dead. But the real shock came from a volunteer scanning the ridge with binoculars. He shouted, pointing to a distant cliff. A makeshift rope, knotted and frayed, dangled from an overhang, leading to a hidden ledge. Below it, half buried in scree, was a single hiking boot, Angelina's confirmed by Cole. Javier climbed to the ledge, his heart pounding. The rope was recent, its fibers clean, not weathered. On the ledge, he found a small metal canister, rusted and leaking a faint sulfur odor. It was unmarked, but its contents, liquid, viscous, suggested a chemical, not natural. Had Angelina found this? Was it why she wrote, not what it seems? The boot, scuffed and torn, had no blood, no tracks nearby. But the canister, the rope, the blood, they pointed to something bigger, something hidden in the Gila's depths. Who was the man whose blood marked her clues? And what was Angelina trying to expose? The Gila wilderness was a furnace of tension, its air thick with the threat of an impending storm. 10 days had passed since Angelina vanished from her tent, leaving a trail of haunting clues. A cracked camera, a blood-smeared keychain, a cryptic note warning, not what it seems. Don't trust, a livestock tag with human blood, and a journal with a frantic entry about lights, sulfur, and the word chupa. The latest find, a frayed rope, Angelina's hiking boot, and a leaking metal canister with a sulfurous odor, had shifted the investigation to a hidden ledge above Sapillo Creek. Detective Javier Ruiz stood on that ledge, the canister in an evidence bag, its viscous contents glinting under his flashlight. The Gila's cliffs loomed like silent sentinels, guarding secrets he was determined to unearth. The search had narrowed to a rugged stretch of canyons and caves, guided by the journal's mention of lights and the mysterious canister. The blood on the keychain, journal, and livestock tag belonged to an unknown male, not Angelina, raising the stakes. Someone else was involved, possibly dead. The Chupacabra rumors, fueled by locals like Elena, who spoke of bloodless kills and clawed tracks, hovered over the case, but Javier saw a human hand behind it. The sulfur smell, the staged clues, the strange tracks, they pointed to a cover-up, not a creature. But what had Angelina stumbled into, and why was her boot alone on that ledge? The search team, now a lean 30 volunteers, pushed through exhaustion. Rain clouds darkened the horizon, threatening to wash away evidence. Ranger Maria Delgado's voice was steady but strained as she coordinated the effort, her map now a web of red lines connecting the clues. "We've got 2 days before the storm hits," she told Javier. "After that, the canyons flood." Javier nodded, his jaw tight. He'd failed his sister years ago in these mountains. He wouldn't fail Angelina. The canister was the key. Its chemical smell suggested something man-made, maybe toxic. Had Angelina found evidence of illegal activity? Was that why she wrote "Don't Trust"? Javier sent the canister to Sarah, the forensics tech, for analysis, but preliminary tests were hours away. The rope, knotted with precision, suggested someone skilled, climber, smuggler, or poacher. The boot, scuffed but intact, had no blood, no signs of struggle, as if Angelina had left it deliberately. Javier's mind churned. The journal's mention of lights on the ridge pointed to human activity, possibly at night. Smugglers? Illegal dumping? The livestock tag hinted at something agricultural, but the blood was human. The pieces didn't fit, yet. The team focused on a network of caves along the ridge, guided by Elena, who knew the terrain. She led Javier to a narrow canyon, its walls streaked with mineral deposits that reeked of sulfur. "This is where I found those kills," she said, pointing to a patch of disturbed dirt. More clawed tracks, deeper than before, mingled with faint boot prints, 2 sets, one matching Angelina's size, the other larger, heavier. Javier's pulse quickened. She wasn't alone. But who was with her and why? Inside the largest cave, the air was thick, the sulfur smell choking. Sarah's UV light revealed more blood spatter, fresher than in the previous cave, and a pile of ash mixed with metal fragments, shards of another canister, melted and warped. Javier crouched, sifting through the debris. "Someone's covering their tracks," he said, his voice low. Sarah nodded. This was a controlled burn. Chemical accelerant, probably. The implications hit hard. Someone was destroying evidence, and Angelina might have seen it happen. Back at the command post, Javier interviewed Cole again. The husband's face was hollow, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. He clutched Angelina's scarf, his voice barely audible. "She was trying to tell me something," he said, staring at the journal's entry. "Those lights, she mentioned them that day, said she saw flashes on the ridge before we went to bed. I thought it was lightning." Javier's pen paused. Why hadn't Cole mentioned this before? "You didn't think it was worth telling us?" he asked, his tone sharp. Cole flinched. "I didn't know it mattered. I was half asleep." Javier made a note. Lights. Cole's omission. Another crack in his story. The investigation took a sharp turn when Sarah called with early lab results. The canister's contents were a mix of industrial chemicals, sulfur compounds, and a pesticide banned in the U.S. for its toxicity. "It's not something you'd find in the wild," she said. "This is deliberate, likely dumped." Javier's mind raced. Illegal dumping explained the sulfur, the ash, the burned canisters. But the human blood? The clawed tracks? Someone was using the Chupacabra myth to scare people away, masking a larger operation. Angelina, with her camera and journal, might have documented it, making her a threat. The twist deepened when a volunteer radioed from a nearby canyon. He'd found a hidden cache, 3 more canisters, identical to the first, buried under rocks. Beside them was a torn piece of fabric, navy, like Angelina's jacket, and a GPS device, hers confirmed by Cole. The device was off, its battery removed, but its last log coordinates pointed to a remote mesa a mile away, accessible only by a dangerous climb. Javier's gut twisted. Angelina had been here, or someone had her gear. But why leave it? Was it a trap or a message? The team moved fast, redirecting to the mesa. The climb was perilous, the shale crumbling underfoot, the wind howling as the storm closed in. Elena led the way, her hunter's instincts sharp. At the mesa's edge, they found a makeshift camp. A tarp, a burned-out fire, and more clawed tracks, these mixed with tire marks, ATV, recent. Javier's heart pounded. This wasn't a lone actor. Someone was moving equipment, chemicals, maybe bodies. The Chupacabra tracks were a ruse, likely made with a tool to mimic claws. But whose blood was on the clues, and where was Angelina? Javier organized a nighttime raid on the mesa, a risky move with the storm looming. The team, 10 rangers, deputies, and volunteers, approached under cover of darkness, their flashlights off to avoid detection. The mesa was silent, but the sulfur smell was strong, guiding them to a hidden crevice. Inside, they found a makeshift lab, canisters, hoses, and a generator humming faintly. The setup was crude but deliberate, designed to process or dispose of chemicals. Javier's blood ran cold. This was no small operation. Someone was dumping toxic waste, using the Gila's remoteness to hide it. Elena spotted movement in the shadows, a figure, cloaked in dark clothing, bolting toward the canyon. Javier gave chase, his boots slipping on wet rock. The figure was fast, vanishing into a slot canyon, but not before dropping something. A knife, its blade stained with dried blood. Javier bagged it, his mind racing. The blood could be the unknown male's, or worse, Angelina's. The team secured the lab, but the figure was gone, swallowed by the Gila's labyrinth. Sarah collected samples, her face pale. "This is bad," she said. "These chemicals, they're lethal in high doses." The raid confirmed Javier's theory. Angelina had stumbled onto an illegal dumping operation, likely tied to the livestock tag and claw tracks used to scare off intruders. The Chupacabra myth was a perfect cover. Locals avoided these canyons, fearing the creature. But the knife suggested violence, and the GPS coordinates pointed to a final piece of the puzzle. Javier powered on the device, its screen flickering to life. The last entry wasn't the mesa. It was a cave, deeper in the canyon, marked with a single word: truth. Back at camp, Javier confronted Cole with a new evidence. The husband's face was a mask of anguish as he saw the knife and GPS. "She was trying to stop them," he whispered. "She saw something that night, didn't she?" Javier pressed him. "Why didn't you mention the lights? What else are you holding back?" Cole's eyes flashed with anger. "I'm not hiding anything. I loved her." But his voice cracked, and he sank to the ground, sobbing. "I should have gone with her. I should have heard her leave." Javier's gut twisted. Cole's grief was real, but his omissions were damning. Was he a victim, or a part of the cover-up? Maria, watching the exchange, pulled Javier aside. "He's breaking, but he's not talking. Focus on the cave. If Angelina's there, we're out of time." Javier nodded, his sister's face flashing in his mind. He'd failed her, but he could still save Angelina, or at least find the truth. The storm was hours away, and the cave was their last shot. The raid on the mesa is a visual goldmine. Sweeping drone shots of the team creeping through the dark, flashlights off, the storm's lightning flickering in the distance. A close-up of the knife, its bloodied blade catching the light, paired with a tense heartbeat sound. The lab's discovery, canisters glinting under headlamps, the sulfur smell almost palpable, builds dread. The final shot, Javier staring at the GPS's glowing screen, the word truth stark against the dark as a voiceover asks, what was Angelina trying to stop? As the team prepared to move on the cave, Sarah rushed to Javier with a final lab result. The knife's blood matched the unknown male's, but a second sample, traced DNA on the GPS, belonged to Angelina. She'd handled it recently, after her disappearance. She was alive, or had been, long enough to mark those coordinates. But the real shock came from a volunteer scanning the cave's entrance with thermal imaging, a faint heat signature, human-shaped, deep inside. Was it Angelina? Or the figure from the mesa, waiting to strike? Javier gripped the GPS, the storm's first raindrops hitting his face. The cave was a mile away, its entrance hidden by a rockfall. The team moved out, their footsteps drowned by thunder. The Chupacabra tracks, the blood, the chemicals, they all led here. But as Javier reached the cave, a new sound echoed from within. Not the grinding noise Cole described, but a low, human moan. Was Angelina still alive? Or was this a trap, set by someone who knew they were coming? The Gila wilderness roared with the fury of an approaching storm, its canyons lit by jagged bolts of lightning that tore across the sky. 11 days had passed since Angelina vanished from her tent, leaving a trail of cryptic clues, a cracked camera, a blood-smeared keychain, a note warning, not what it seems. Don't trust, a livestock tag, a journal mentioning lights and chupa, and a chemical canister tied to an illegal dumping operation. The latest discovery, a GPS marking a cave with the word truth, a bloodied knife, and a thermal heat signature, had led Detective Javier Ruiz and his team to a hidden cave deep in the Sapillo Creek Canyon. A low, human moan echoed from within, carried by the wind as rain began to lash the rocks. Javier's heart pounded. Was Angelina alive, or was this a trap set by the figure they'd chased from the mesa? The search team, now a tight unit of Javier, Ranger Maria Delgado, Hunter Elena, and forensics tech Sarah, approached the cave with weapons drawn, their flashlights cutting through the downpour. The entrance was narrow, half blocked by a rockfall, the sulfur smell overwhelming. The clawed tracks, now recognized as a deliberate ruse to mimic the Chupacabra myth, mingled with fresh boot prints in the mud. Javier's mind raced. The illegal dumping operation, toxic pesticides, burned evidence, human blood, pointed to a calculated cover-up. Angelina had stumbled onto it, her journal and GPS proof she'd tried to document the truth. But whose blood was on the clues, and who was the figure in the shadows? Inside, the cave was a labyrinth of damp stone, its walls glistening with mineral deposits. The moan came again, weaker, from a chamber deep within. Javier led the way, his flashlight beam trembling. The air was thick, the sulfur stinging his eyes. At the chamber's entrance, they found her, Angelina, slumped against a wall, her face pale, her clothes torn. She was alive, barely, her left leg bloodied from a deep gash. Beside her lay a man, mid-40s, unconscious, his shirt stained with blood from a stab wound. A makeshift tool, a metal claw rigged to a handle, lay nearby, its edges caked with dirt. The Chupacabra tracks were no myth. They were his creation, a scare tactic to keep locals away. Angelina! Javier knelt beside her, checking her pulse. It was weak, but steady. She stirred, her eyes fluttering. The chemicals, she whispered, her voice hoarse. They're dumping, killing the land. Maria radioed for a medevac, her voice urgent as the storm raged outside. Sarah examined the man, confirming he was alive but critical. His wallet identified him as Daniel Holt, a contractor with no local ties. The blood on the knife, keychain, and journal was his, not Angelina's. The pieces were falling into place, but the full truth was still unfolding. Angelina was airlifted to a hospital in Silver City, her condition stable but serious. Holt was taken into custody, intubated but alive. Javier pieced together the story from Angelina's fragmented account and the evidence. She'd seen lights on the ridge that night. Not lightning, but headlamps from an ATV. Curious, she'd left the tent to investigate, her camera in hand. She stumbled onto Holt and another man unloading canisters of banned pesticides, part of an illegal dumping scheme tied to a shady agribusiness operating across the border. The Gila's remoteness made it a perfect hiding spot, and the Chupacabra myth, amplified by Holt's clawed tool, kept locals at bay. Angelina had tried to document the operation, snapping photos before realizing she'd been spotted. Holt chased her, and in the struggle, she dropped her camera, its memory card taken to destroy evidence. She fought back, wounding Holt with his own knife, and fled, hiding her journal and GPS to leave a trail. The note, not what it seems. Don't trust, was meant for Cole, a warning about the men she'd seen, though she never finished it. She'd survive in the cave, using her skills to stay alive, but dehydration and her injury had nearly killed her. Holt's partner, the figure from the mesa, was still at large. Javier's team searched the canyon but found only abandoned ATVs and more canisters, the storm washing away tracks. The lab confirmed the chemicals were linked to a defunct company with ties to organized crime, dumping waste to cut costs. The livestock tag, number 47, was a marker for a drop site, not cattle. The bloodless animal kills? A side effect of the pesticides, which poisoned wildlife in ways that mimicked the Chupacabra's gruesome legend. Holt had leaned into the myth, carving tracks to scare off hikers and rangers. At the hospital, Cole sat by Angelina's bedside, his face a mix of relief and guilt. She squeezed his hand, her voice weak but clear. "I thought I could stop them," she said. "I didn't want to drag you into it." Cole's eyes welled up. "I should have followed you. I should have known." Javier watched from the doorway, his doubts about Cole fading. The husband's omissions about the lights, Angelina's stress, were born of ignorance, not deceit. Her work at the clinic had exposed her to rumors of illegal dumping, patients sick from contaminated water. That's why she'd taken leave, why she'd been vigilant that night. She wasn't just a hiker, she was a protector. Javier felt the weight lift, but not entirely. His sister's death still haunted him, a reminder of failures he couldn't undo. Finding Angelina alive was a victory, but the cost was high. The Gila's beauty was tainted, its rivers poisoned by greed. Maria, exhausted but resolute, joined him outside. "We got her back," she said. "That's what matters." Javier nodded, but his eyes were on the horizon, where the storm still churned. Holt's partner was out there, and the operation might not be over. Holt recovered enough to face charges: attempted murder, illegal dumping, and conspiracy. His testimony, traded for a plea deal, exposed a network of contractors dumping toxic waste across the Southwest. The second man, identified as a fixer named Ruiz, no relation to Javier, was arrested 2 weeks later in El Paso. The company behind it, a shell corporation, dissolved, its executives vanishing before indictments. The case made national news, with Angelina hailed as a whistleblower who risked her life to expose the truth. The trial was swift but unsatisfying. Holt got 15 years, Ruiz 10, but the mastermind escaped. Angelina testified from a wheelchair, her legs still healing, her voice steady as she described the night she saw the lights. "I thought I could make a difference," she said, her eyes on Cole. "I didn't know it had cost so much." The courtroom was silent, the weight of her words heavy. Javier sat in the back, his notebook closed. Justice was partial, as it often was. The Gila would heal, but slowly, its scars deeper than the canyons. Back in the Gila, Javier walked the middle fork alone, the river's murmur a faint comfort. The search camp was gone, the volunteers scattered, but the wilderness remained, vast and indifferent. He thought of Angelina's journal, her sketches of birds and plants, her love for this place. She'd nearly died to protect it, and he wondered if he'd have done the same. His sister's face flashed in his mind, not accusing, but present. He'd found Angelina, but the Gila still held secrets. How many other canisters were buried in its depths? How many other lives had been poisoned? Cole and Angelina moved to a small town in Colorado, away from the Gila shadow. She sent Javier a letter, thanking him, with a photo of her and Cole hiking again, her smile bright but cautious. "We're healing," she wrote, "but we'll never forget." Javier kept the letter in his desk, a reminder of why he kept going. The Chupacabra myth faded, replaced by the grim reality of human greed, but locals still whispered of strange tracks, of sounds in the night. Javier didn't believe in monsters, but he knew the wilderness could make them. The cave rescue is cinematic. Rain-soaked rangers moving through the dark, their flashlights catching Angelina's pale face, the moan echoing as thunder cracks. A close-up of the clawed tool, its metal glinting, ties the Chupacabra myth to human deceit. The trial scene could show Angelina's testimony, her voice steady over shots of the poisoned Gila River, its water murky. The final shot, Javier walking the river alone, the storm clearing as a voiceover asks, "What else does the wilderness hide?" As Javier stood by the river, a ranger radioed with a report. A hiker had found another canister, half buried, miles from Sapillo Creek. No tracks, no blood, just the faint smell of sulfur. The operation was bigger than they'd thought, its roots deeper than one arrest could uproot. Javier looked at the Gila's cliffs, their beauty untouched, but their secrets unyielding. Could the tragedy have been avoided if Angelina hadn't gone alone? Or was the wilderness always destined to claim its price?